The treaty ended the war, until the human fought like a war god's smoke drifted across the horizon, curling lazily into the sky above the ruined city. Buildings that had once stood tall and proud were now jagged skeletons of steel and concrete. The air smelled of burning metal and ash, a bitter reminder of the war that had lasted for decades. On the cracked streets, humans and Zaire, alien beings with tall, sleek frames and luminous eyes, moved cautiously, some carrying supplies, others examining the wreckage for survivors. It was a day that should have marked the end of all conflict. A treaty had been signed, promising peace. But peace, Ethan had learned, was never simple. He stood on a platform built hastily in the center of the ruined city. His uniform was clean, pressed, a sharp contrast to the dirt and grime that coated the streets below. His boots rested firmly on the metal, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the gathering crowd. Humans and Zaire representatives alike were assembling for the signing ceremony. Their faces were a mixture of relief and distrust. After years of fighting, trust was not something given freely. It had to be earned, and sometimes even then it was fleeting. The Zaire delegation moved with precise steps, their long fingers brushing over tablets and devices that seemed to pulse with soft energy. Ethan observed them carefully, noting the subtle tension in their shoulders and the way their eyes flickered toward one another as though silently communicating. These were not simple warriors. They were cunning, intelligent, and proud. Any misstep could unravel the fragile peace the treaty promised. Ethan's attention was drawn to the human civilians mingling with their alien neighbors. Children cautiously reached out to touch the smooth, iridescent skin of Zaire youths, while adults exchanged food, water, and medical supplies. The scene was almost surreal. Humans had been trained to fight, to survive in the harshest conditions, yet here they were, extending hands in friendship rather than weapons. It was the kind of small act that spoke louder than the armies that had clashed across the galaxy. A hush fell over the crowd as the leaders approached the platform. The Zaire counselor, a tall figure with silver markings along his head, stepped forward, bowing slightly. Ethan returned the gesture, a small nod that carried the weight of his responsibility. He could feel the tension, the unspoken warning in the counselor's gaze, trust us or face the consequences. The signing itself was a brief formality. Stylus met tablet, ink glimmered on parchment, and signatures were exchanged. Cameras and recording devices captured every detail, ensuring that history would remember the moment as one of reconciliation. Cheers erupted from some in the crowd, while others remained silent, wary of celebrating too soon. War, after all, had taught them caution. As the formalities ended, Ethan descended from the platform. He moved among the crowd, greeting human soldiers and civilians, offering smiles where he could. His mind, however, was not at ease. Something in the way the Zaire moved, in the way they whispered among themselves, hinted at unrest. He had spent too many years in command to ignore instinct. War taught observation. Observation kept people alive. He approached a small group of Zaire engineers who were inspecting a damaged transport vehicle. One of them, Kale, noticed Ethan watching and gave a subtle nod. It was not a greeting, not yet, but a recognition. Kale's eyes were sharp, intelligent, and there was a spark there, a curiosity that mirrored humanity's own. Ethan allowed himself a brief thought. Perhaps there was hope here. Even among former enemies, understanding could grow. Despite the outward calm, the night brought whispers of trouble. Ethan had insisted on a small perimeter patrol, even in the supposedly safe neutral zone. The patrol team reported nothing unusual at first, but as the moon rose high in the sky, subtle signs began to emerge. Supply crates had been tampered with, communications intercepted, and faint tracks in the dirt suggested movement by unseen forces. It was not an accident. Someone wanted to disrupt the peace, to ignite flames that had barely been extinguished. Ethan gathered his closest advisors in a small tent illuminated by soft, electric lights. Maps of the surrounding area were spread across a table, markers indicating known positions of both human and Zaire units. "We cannot ignore this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The treaty only holds as long as both sides respect it. Someone is testing that limit." His advisors nodded, though the worry in their eyes was clear. They had fought too long, too hard to allow another war to begin so soon. Yet Ethan knew the truth. Wars were rarely fought in open ceremonies. They began in shadows, in whispers, in the silent movements that no one noticed until it was too late. Hours passed as the tent remained alive with discussion. Plans were drafted, contingencies prepared, and patrols quietly repositioned. Ethan moved among his people, offering guidance, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. It was exhausting work, but necessary. Peace was fragile, and he would not allow it to crumble through negligence. Outside the tent, the city slept under a shroud of uncertainty. Fires smoldered in distant ruins, their glow casting long shadows that danced across broken walls. Ethan walked alone for a moment, the quiet pressing in around him. He thought of the families who had survived, of the children who would grow up knowing only stories of war, and of the humans who had endured horrors he could scarcely imagine. They deserved better. They deserved a future. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, footsteps on cracked stone, careful and deliberate. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the sidearm at his hip, a human reflex honed by years of combat. He moved silently, following the sound to a narrow alley where a figure darted behind debris. It was a Zaire scout, clearly trying to avoid detection. Ethan did not raise his weapon. Instead, he stepped into the moonlight, letting the human shadow stretch across the ground. The scout froze, eyes wide with fear. Ethan spoke softly, his tone firm but not threatening. "Who sent you?" The scout's body trembled, but it shook its head. The answer was clear: fear, confusion, and loyalty to forces unknown. Ethan's mind raced. The war was not over. Peace had been declared on paper, but on the ground, tensions simmered like a storm ready to break. Ethan returned to the tent, his expression unreadable. His team noticed the shift in his demeanor. "What did you find?" one of his advisors asked. "Trouble," he said simply. "Someone doesn't want peace. They will test us, push boundaries, and see how far we can be stretched." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "And we will not fail." The night stretched on, and the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The ruined city glowed in soft pink and gold, a deceptive calm covering the scars of war. Humans and Zaire emerged from their shelters, preparing for the day's ceremonies that would mark the new era. Children laughed cautiously, soldiers shared quiet words of camaraderie, and the air was filled with a sense of tentative hope. Yet Ethan knew the truth: hope alone was not enough. Peace required vigilance, intelligence, and sometimes the courage to act before the enemy struck. As he looked out across the city, he felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders once more. He would protect this fragile new world, not with blind trust, but with careful watchfulness, clever strategy, and the unyielding resolve that had made humanity a force in the galaxy. Hours later, as the treaty celebrations began, Ethan stood among the crowd once more. He watched the humans and Zaire interact, shared smiles and exchanged stories, but his mind never rested. Every movement, every whisper, every shadow was a potential threat. And somewhere beyond the edges of the city, the first signs of rebellion were already taking shape. He clenched his fists briefly, not in anger but in determination. If they want war, he thought, they will find that humans are not so easy to break. We fight smarter, faster, and with every ounce of our resolve. They will see what it means to challenge us. The city seemed peaceful, bathed in the soft morning light, but Ethan knew better. Peace was not given, it was earned, and it could vanish in an instant. But humans had survived worse, had risen from the ashes countless times, and they would do so again. And so, the day began. The treaty had been signed, the celebrations were underway. But in the shadows, a new challenge waited. The war was over for now. But Ethan knew that the real test had only just begun, and humanity would be ready. The morning sun rose over the ruined city, casting long shadows across the streets and crumbled buildings. The celebrations of peace continued, but Ethan, he remained alert. Every smile, every handshake, every exchanged gift between humans and Zaire was carefully watched. The city was calm, but calm often hid danger. Years of war had taught him that threats often came quietly, like whispers in the wind, before striking without warning. Reports came quickly to Ethan's command tent. Supplies from human and Zaire convoys had been sabotaged. Certain communication channels were being monitored and interfered with. There were no open attacks yet, but the signs were clear. Someone was testing the limits of this fragile peace. Ethan reviewed the data carefully. He traced the patterns of the interference, mapping out the most likely routes the saboteurs had taken. "We need to act," said one of his advisors. "Do we call on the Zaire to help?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. If this is an internal faction, we can handle it quietly." No need to alarm the entire coalition. We observe first, then strike. That is how humans survive. He assigned a small squad to investigate the supply depots and patrol the outskirts of the city. Ethan trusted his people, they were trained for this, but he also knew that this was not a standard threat. Whoever was behind this had knowledge of both human and Zyre operations. They had experience and cunning. That meant the humans would need to fight smart, not just hard. As the squad moved through the city, Ethan watched them from a high platform, his eyes scanning every shadow. His attention was caught by a movement near a collapsed building. A small figure slipped between the debris, moving almost silently. Ethan's instincts told him it was not a civilian. He signaled to a nearby scout who approached cautiously. The scout returned moments later, whispering urgently, "Human, it's a Zyre operative. He isn't attacking, but he's moving deliberately, scanning the area." Ethan's mind raced. Could this be Kale, the Zyre commander he had met during the treaty, or someone else entirely? Regardless, the presence of a Zyre moving independently meant either curiosity or danger. Ethan made his decision quickly. We follow, but remain unseen. Do not engage unless necessary. The figure led them toward the edge of the city, near a crumbling bridge that spanned a dried-up riverbed. There, hidden in the shadows, was a small camp. Crates of equipment were scattered, and faint energy readings suggested unauthorized weaponry. It was exactly what Ethan had feared, rogue elements preparing for war, even as the treaty claimed peace. Ethan signaled his squad to hold position. He approached the camp quietly, observing from a safe distance. The rogue Zyre were efficient, moving with precision, checking their supplies and communicating in low, urgent tones. They were well-trained, disciplined, and dangerous. But there was something about their methods that betrayed them. They were careful, but they lacked the improvisation and adaptability that humans naturally possessed. That thought gave Ethan a small measure of confidence. Humans might not match them in raw alien technology, but they could outthink them. They could turn the battlefield into a trap. They could use cunning, creativity, and quick adaptation to survive and to win. He returned to the command tent and shared his findings. Maps, data, and energy readings were displayed on holographic panels. His advisors leaned in, examining the rogue camp with growing concern. "We need to strike," one of them urged. "If we wait, they will attack first." Ethan shook his head again. "A direct strike would alert the entire faction. We need to be smarter. We need to use their own assumptions against them." Plans were drawn carefully. Using repurposed Zyre scanners, human engineers modified drones to simulate patrol patterns in the wrong areas, sending false signals to confuse the rogue faction. Small teams were positioned at strategic points, ready to respond with speed and precision. Every detail was considered, every contingency prepared. Humans might not have the strength of the Zyre, but they had creativity, and Ethan intended to use it. Night fell again, and the city grew quiet under the cover of darkness. Ethan led a reconnaissance team toward the rogue camp. Moving silently, they observed the Zyre preparing energy weapons that could devastate a human settlement. The tension was palpable. One wrong move, and the situation could escalate into open conflict, breaking the treaty before it truly began. Ethan signaled his squad, and in coordinated steps, they began their operation. Small drones flew overhead, sending false signals. Energy readings were manipulated to suggest patrols in one area, drawing the rogue Zyre away from the human strike team. Using low-gravity packs and modified gravlifts, Ethan's squad moved with uncanny speed, bypassing security measures that would have stopped anyone else. They reached the perimeter of the camp and observed. The rogue Zyre had assumed that humans would attack head-on. They had not anticipated improvisation, rapid movement, and the use of alien technology in ways it was not intended. Ethan smiled briefly. Humans had always survived by thinking faster, acting smarter, and refusing to surrender to the odds. A small explosion drew attention elsewhere in the camp. Ethan signaled his squad to move. Using ropes, lifts, and careful timing, they disabled several energy weapons before the rogue Zyre could react. Panic spread among the rogue faction as their traps failed, their weapons were neutralized, and their confidence faltered. Ethan moved through the chaos with calm precision, his squad covering every angle. They captured key data terminals, securing information about the faction's plans, positions, and resources. By the time the rogue Zyre realized what had happened, Their operation had been dismantled without a single civilian casualty. Returning to the command tent, Ethan reviewed the recovered data. It was worse than he had feared. The rogue faction had been planning coordinated attacks on multiple human settlements. Their goal was not simple sabotage. It was to reignite the war, to make humans appear weak and unprepared. The treaty was a lie to them, a temporary pause before chaos. Ethan's mind raced, but his resolve was steady. Humans had survived threats that seemed impossible. They had turned the tide against overwhelming odds countless times before. Now, faced with a hidden enemy, they would do the same, but it would require more than courage. It would require strategy, ingenuity, and the willingness to fight smarter than anyone expected. Over the next days, Ethan organized defenses and prepared countermeasures. Human engineers modified Xar energy shields to protect settlements, designed traps that could slow enemy movements, and trained volunteers in rapid response tactics. Every human became a part of the strategy, contributing in ways the Xar could not predict. He appeared at the edge of the city one afternoon, moving cautiously toward Ethan. He did not speak at first, merely observing the preparations. "You humans are unusual," he said finally. His tone carried no threat, only honest curiosity. "Your methods are clever, unpredictable. I did not expect this after the treaty," Ethan nodded. "We survive because we must, and we fight because we have no choice but to protect our people." His voice was calm, measured, but it carried a weight that Kale recognized. Humans had endured horrors that no Xar could imagine and had emerged stronger each time. Kale studied him, then spoke with a hint of admiration. "Perhaps there is hope, even among us, if only the rogue factions could see what we can accomplish together." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "The rogue factions do not care about hope. They care about power. We stop them, or they will destroy everything we have built." The next attack came at dawn. Scouts reported unusual energy readings in a nearby human settlement. Ethan's team moved immediately, using both speed and strategy to intercept the attackers. The rogue Xar had expected humans to respond in predictable ways. Instead, they were met with traps, rapid maneuvers, and coordinated counterattacks that left them disoriented. Humans fought not with sheer strength, but with intelligence and adaptability. They used the environment to their advantage, maneuvering through ruins, setting clever ambushes, and manipulating the rogue faction's assumptions. Every human involved contributed to the success. Engineers disabled weapons, medics treated the wounded, and civilians guided patrols through hidden routes. By midday, the rogue faction was forced to retreat. Ethan surveyed the aftermath, noting the lack of civilian casualties and the efficient neutralization of threats. Humans had once again proven their ability to overcome forces that seemed stronger, faster, or more technologically advanced. Returning to the command tent, Ethan shared the results with his team. "We've won today," he said, "not by brute force, but by outthinking the enemy. This is what humans do best. We adapt, we improvise, and we never give up. The treaty may have ended the war on paper, but we are ready for whatever comes next." Kale observed quietly, his expression thoughtful. "You fight like a war god," he said softly. His words carried both warning and respect. "If this is what humans can do when surprised, imagine what you might accomplish when fully prepared." Ethan smiled faintly. "We have no choice but to be prepared, and we will not fail." The city settled again, this time under a watchful calm. Humans repaired damage, strengthened defenses, and continued the celebrations of peace, but the lessons of the past days were clear. Peace was fragile, trust was earned, and rogue factions would always test the limits. Ethan knew that the challenges were far from over. The rogue Xar were still out there, planning, waiting, and underestimating humanity's resolve. But humans had a strength that no weapon could match: intelligence, adaptability, and an unyielding spirit. Wherever the enemy struck next, humans would be ready, not just to survive, but to triumph. Night fell once more over the city, the stars above shining brightly over the ruins. Ethan stood on a balcony, looking out at the faint glow of distant settlements. Every light represented human determination, hope, and resilience. Somewhere out there, the rogue faction moved in shadows, unaware that they had already faced defeat without realizing it. Ethan clenched his fists briefly, not in anger but in determination. "They will test us again," he thought, "and again. But they will learn, as all have before, that humans are not easily broken. We fight smarter, faster, and with every ounce of our resolve. They will see what it means to challenge us. And so the second day passed, the rogue threat contained but not eliminated. The human spirit remained unshaken, growing stronger with each challenge. The peace treaty had ended the war officially, but the true test of humanity's strength was only beginning. The morning light broke over the horizon, turning the ruined city into a mosaic of shadows and soft gold. The peace treaty still stood on paper, but Ethan, he knew the real test was beginning. The rogue Tsar factions were growing bolder, striking at settlements and supply lines in ways that suggested careful planning and confidence. Humans could not simply react, they had to take control of the situation. Ethan gathered his squad in the command tent, maps and holograms flickering across the table. Each point of energy disruption, each trace of movement from the rogue factions was carefully marked. They believe that they can scare us, confuse us, make us react too slowly, Ethan said, his voice calm but commanding. But we are not going to react blindly. We are going to act first, and we are going to outthink them at every turn. Engineers and tacticians nodded, energized by his determination. Humans had faced overwhelming odds before, and each time they had used brains over brute force to survive. They modified drones to project false troop movements, created holographic decoys, and even repurposed alien technology to enhance their sensors and communications. Every detail mattered. Every advantage had to be used. Ethan led a scouting mission personally, moving through the outskirts of the city where rogue Tsar activity had been detected. The squad was small, fast, and well-trained. As they advanced, Ethan noticed the precision of the rogue faction's setups. Hidden energy traps, encrypted communication devices, and patrol drones moving in unpredictable patterns. They were skilled, but there was one thing humans had that they could not anticipate: adaptability. The first encounter came at a narrow canyon where the rogue Tsar had set up a blockade. They believed humans would confront them head-on, relying on strength and numbers. Instead, Ethan signaled his squad to move along the canyon walls, using climbing gear and portable grav lifts. The humans flanked the blockade silently, bypassing defenses while the rogue faction focused on the wrong areas. From a high vantage point, Ethan observed the Tsar's reaction. Their confusion was immediate. They had planned for a direct assault, but humans were not predictable. With a small team, Ethan disabled several energy traps, allowing the rest of his squad to pass safely. By the time the rogue Tsar realized the humans had evaded the blockade entirely, they were already behind enemy lines, capturing critical supply depots and communications terminals. Returning to the command tent, Ethan analyzed the captured data. The rogue faction had been coordinating multiple strikes across several settlements. Their strategy was meant to fragment human defenses and create fear, but the humans had already turned the tables, striking first and gathering intelligence. Ethan turned to his advisors. "They underestimated us," he said. "They thought we would fight as they expected, with force alone, but humans fight differently. We improvise, we adapt, and we never give up. We are about to show them just how dangerous that can be." Over the next few days, humans continued their strategic operations. Small squads moved quickly and quietly to intercept rogue units before they could reach settlements. Engineers used salvaged Tsar technology to create defensive barriers that could be deployed within minutes. Civilians volunteered to guide squads through hidden routes, sharing knowledge of terrain that even the Tsar were unfamiliar with. Every human contributed in some way, and every contribution made a difference. Kale, he returned to observe the operations, moving among the humans with careful attention. He had grown more curious about their methods, watching as humans neutralized threats using clever tricks rather than brute force. "Your people are remarkable," Kale said one evening after observing a successful interception. "They do not just survive, they dominate the battlefield in ways I cannot predict. It is impressive." Ethan nodded, not taking credit for the human spirit. "Humans have always survived," he said, "not because we are stronger, but because we think faster, adapt faster, and refuse to give up. That is why we are still here. That is why we will win." The rogue Tsar, realizing that humans were anticipating their moves, changed tactics. They launched a massive assault on a lightly defended settlement, hoping to draw humans into a trap. But Ethan was ready. Using predictive modeling and real-time intelligence from scouts, he deployed squads in precise positions, creating ambushes and countermeasures that left the rogue faction exposed. The humans' ingenuity shone brightly. Using the terrain to their advantage, they funneled enemy units into narrow corridors where energy weapons were less effective. They used decoys and holograms to confuse enemy sensors, and small teams disabled key equipment without being detected. By the end of the day, the rogue Xyr had suffered significant losses, retreating in disarray. Returning to the command tent, Ethan reviewed the results. The humans had not just defended, they had struck decisively, sending a clear message. This was not a reactionary fight. It was a calculated, intelligent, and highly coordinated campaign. Humans were no longer merely participants in the conflict, they were masters of it. Kale observed quietly, his expression thoughtful. "They call you the war god," he said softly, almost in disbelief. "I can see why. You lead not with force, but with intelligence and strategy. Even our best commanders would struggle against such tactics." Ethan smiled faintly, appreciating the acknowledgement but remaining focused. "This is only the beginning. The rogue faction will regroup and they will test us again, but humans do not break. We fight smarter, faster, and together. That is how we survive and how we win." The rogue faction, frustrated by repeated failures, began using more desperate measures. They attempted to disrupt energy grids, disable communications, and strike at critical supply lines simultaneously. But humans were ready. Advanced monitoring systems, combined with the ingenuity of engineers and tacticians, allowed Ethan's teams to anticipate movements and respond before attacks could succeed. In one operation, a rogue unit attempted to infiltrate a human energy station. Ethan personally led a small squad to intercept. Using speed, stealth, and careful timing, they neutralized the threat, capturing critical intelligence in the process. This data revealed plans for a larger offensive, designed to hit multiple settlements at once. Humans now had the opportunity to preempt the attack entirely. Ethan coordinated a massive counter-operation. Human squads moved with precision, disabling weapons, redirecting enemy units, and creating false targets to lure the rogue Xyr into traps. The operation was executed flawlessly. Rogue forces were divided, disoriented, and demoralized. By nightfall, multiple settlements had been secured, enemy plans were in shambles, and humans had proven that their ingenuity was a force even the Xyr could not easily counter. The city itself seemed to pulse with energy. Civilians repaired damage, engineers enhanced defenses, and soldiers trained in new tactics. Humans had taken the initiative and turned a potential disaster into a display of strength and intelligence. The name War God began to circulate quietly, whispered among humans and Xyr alike, describing the combination of strategy, courage, and adaptability that Ethan displayed. Kale returned once more, this time with a small delegation of Xyr officers who had remained neutral in the rogue faction's uprising. "You have earned our respect," Kale said. "Not through violence alone, but through cleverness, courage, and leadership. Humans are remarkable." Ethan studied them, noting both curiosity and caution in their expressions. "Respect must be earned," he said, "and humans earn it by surviving, by protecting our people, and by never giving up. That is what makes us strong. That is what makes us worth trusting." As night fell, Ethan looked out over the city. Fires burned gently in distant settlements, smoke rising in thin columns against the starlit sky. Humans and Xyr worked side by side, rebuilding, repairing, and preparing for the future. The rogue faction had been pushed back, but they were not gone. They would return, and they would challenge humanity again. Ethan felt the weight of command, but also the quiet pride that came from knowing that humans were ready. They had turned desperation into advantage, weakness into strength, and chaos into opportunity. Every action, every decision, every moment of courage had reinforced the truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. The first light of dawn touched the horizon once more, illuminating the ruined city and the ongoing preparations. Humans moved with purpose, their resolve unbroken. Ethan knew that the challenges ahead would be greater, the enemy more cunning, but humans had a unique advantage. Their ability to adapt, think quickly, and unite under leadership that never wavered. Somewhere beyond the city, the rogue Xyr regrouped, unaware that their plans had been anticipated, neutralized, and turned against them. They would return, yes, but by then, humans would be ready. They would face any threat, overcome any obstacle, and continue to survive, stronger and smarter with every challenge. Ethan, he took a deep breath and looked at the stars. Humanity had already proven it could endure the impossible. Now they were showing the galaxy that they could fight like no other species, relentless, clever, and unstoppable. The name War God was not just a rumor anymore. It was a warning, a symbol, and a promise. And the Rogue Tsar would soon learn that when humans fought, they did so not only with strength and courage, but with the unyielding force of intelligence, strategy, and heart. The city awoke under a calm, clear sky, but calm was a fragile thing. Ethan, he stood at the edge of the command tent, scanning the horizon. Reports of Rogue Tsar activity had slowed for a moment, but intelligence suggested they were regrouping, planning something larger. Humans had proven they could defend, improvise, and strike effectively, but now it was time to take the fight closer to the source of the threat. Ethan called a meeting with his top commanders. Holographic displays flickered in the tent, showing enemy positions, patrol routes, and supply lines. "The rogue factions are strong," Ethan said, his voice calm and steady, "but they are disorganized. They have resources, but they do not have our creativity, our determination, or our resolve. We strike strategically, we hit quickly, and we minimize risks to civilians. That is how we win." Plans were drawn carefully. Human squads would move into Tsar-controlled regions, not to conquer, but to disrupt. Supply lines would be severed, communication hubs disabled, and key leaders captured if possible. The humans did not seek destruction for its own sake. They sought intelligence, leverage, and above all, the safety of their people. As preparations moved forward, Kale, he returned, this time with a small team of moderate Tsar leaders who had refused to join the rogue factions. "Your people inspire caution and admiration," Kale said, his tone serious. "We are willing to help. The rogue factions will not succeed if we act together." Ethan studied them carefully. "Trust is earned," he replied, "and right now our focus is on stopping the rogue factions. We will work together, but we must be careful. They are dangerous, clever, and desperate." By mid-morning, squads began moving. Humans advanced in small, coordinated teams, using modified gravlifts, stealth technology, and agile transports to navigate the terrain. They avoided open conflict whenever possible, relying on speed, intelligence, and clever tactics to stay ahead of enemy movements. Every squad carried portable shields, energy disruptors, and communication devices that could jam enemy signals without causing permanent damage. Ethan led one of the forward teams personally. They approached a large Tsar supply hub hidden in a valley, surrounded by high cliffs and patrolled by advanced drones. The humans observed quietly from a ridge, analyzing patrol patterns and energy flows. Every detail mattered. Every step was planned with precision. Using portable gravlifts, Ethan's team descended quietly into the valley, avoiding detection. Engineers disabled drone sensors, creating temporary blind spots, while tactical units secured the perimeter. Within moments, humans had taken control of key entrances, isolating the hub from external support. Inside, the team discovered crates of energy weapons, communication relays, and tactical data. Ethan quickly coordinated the collection of intelligence while ensuring no unnecessary damage occurred. Civilians in nearby settlements would remain safe, and any Tsar workers not aligned with the rogue faction were protected. As the team finished, alarms began to sound. The rogue Tsar had detected the disruption. Ethan signaled his squad to prepare for a swift extraction. Using the terrain to their advantage, the humans created diversionary blasts and holographic decoys, confusing the enemy long enough to retreat without casualties. Back at the command tent, Ethan reviewed the recovered data. Maps showed enemy positions, patrol rotations, and hidden fortresses. Plans for coordinated attacks on multiple human settlements were detailed, but now humans had the upper hand. Knowledge had become power, and Ethan intended to use it wisely. Over the next days, humans conducted multiple operations, each more ambitious than the last. Small teams disrupted communication hubs, intercepted weapon shipments, and captured rogue leaders without resorting to unnecessary violence. Civilians were guided to safety, and local communities began to see the humans not as invaders, but as protectors. The rogue Zaire, frustrated by repeated failures, escalated their tactics. They launched orbital energy strikes against lightly defended settlements, hoping to break human morale. But humans had anticipated such moves. Using repurposed Zaire shields and rapid deployment units, they intercepted strikes, redirecting energy blasts harmlessly into the atmosphere while simultaneously neutralizing enemy platforms. Kale observed one such operation, visibly impressed. "Your people are unlike anything I have encountered," he said. "Even our best strategists would struggle against such precision and ingenuity. You are not just surviving, you are shaping the battlefield itself." Ethan nodded, keeping his focus. "Survival is not enough," he replied. "We must protect our people, safeguard our homes, and prevent chaos before it spreads. That is how humans survive, and that is how we win." As operations continued, humans began to earn respect from moderate Zaire factions. Some rogue units defected when faced with overwhelming strategy and humane treatment. Humans were not only demonstrating strength, they were inspiring loyalty through fairness, intelligence, and courage. Every victory reinforced the truth. Humans were not simply soldiers, they were leaders, thinkers, and protectors. One evening, as the sun set behind distant mountains, Ethan convened a final strategy meeting. The rogue Zaire were consolidating in a heavily fortified region near a canyon system. Intelligence suggested they planned a final, desperate strike. If successful, it could destabilize the entire area and undo weeks of careful work. Ethan studied the holographic display. "We do not fight blindly," he said. "We will move strategically, strike decisively, and use their overconfidence against them. This is not about brute force. This is about thinking, adapting, and acting faster than they can anticipate." The plan was ambitious. Human squads would infiltrate multiple locations simultaneously, cutting off escape routes and communications. Engineers would deploy temporary shields to protect civilian areas, while tactical units engaged only when necessary to neutralize threats. Every movement was calculated, every squad had contingency plans, and every human involved knew their role. The operation began at dawn. Humans moved like shadows, unseen and precise. Using terrain, clever diversions, and rapid deployment technology, they quickly disrupted enemy patrols, captured leaders, and secured key locations. Rogue Zaire forces were confused, disoriented, and trapped by the very plans they had devised to counter humans. Ethan led the final push into the central fortress of the rogue faction. Using small teams, portable shields, and precise timing, humans neutralized threats without causing unnecessary damage. The rogue Zaire were forced to surrender, realizing that brute force alone could not defeat humans. Intelligence, strategy, and adaptability had turned the tide. Inside the fortress, Ethan confronted the rogue leader, a tall Zaire commander who had orchestrated the attacks. "Your plans are clever," Ethan said, "but not enough. Humans survive because we adapt, think, and act together. You cannot win against that." The rogue commander paused, studying Ethan. "You are extraordinary," he said. "I underestimated you." Ethan nodded. "Underestimating humans is a mistake many have made. We survive, we protect, and we fight smarter than anyone expects. That is why we endure." As the rogue leader was escorted to containment, Kale arrived with a group of moderate Zaire. "Your people are more than warriors," he said. "They are leaders, thinkers, and protectors. I am honored to stand with them." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. The battle was not just won through technology or strength, but through intelligence, coordination, and moral courage. Humans had proven that they were capable of extraordinary things when challenged, and that their strength was measured not just by weapons, but by creativity, strategy, and unity. The settlements began to recover. Civilians rebuilt homes, engineers strengthened defenses, and humans worked alongside moderate Zaire to repair infrastructure. The rogue factions were contained, their plans dismantled, and the peace treaty now had real meaning. Humans were no longer just participants. They were leaders in shaping stability and safety for all. Night fell over the city once more, and Ethan stood on a balcony, looking out at the quiet settlements below. Fires burned gently in distant homes, smoke rising softly into the night sky. The human spirit had prevailed again, turning desperation into strategy, chaos into opportunity, and threats into lessons learned. He thought of the future. The rogue Zaire were weakened but not gone, and other threats would emerge. But humans had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. Intelligence, courage, and determination that could overcome even the most advanced and cunning foes. Kale joined him, standing silently for a moment. "They will remember this day," he said. "Your people are different. Even we who have fought for centuries see it now. Humans fight not just with power, but with heart, mind, and spirit." Ethan nodded, looking at the stars above. "It is not enough to survive," he said softly. "We protect, we lead, and we show that we are worth respect. That is what humans do best. That is how we endure." The quiet of the night stretched over the city, a temporary calm that allowed humans to breathe, rebuild, and reflect. The rogue Zaire had been defeated, but lessons had been learned. Every battle, every strategy, every act of courage reinforced the truth. Humans were not simply survivors. They were innovators, protectors, and leaders capable of shaping the fate of the galaxy. And somewhere beyond the horizon, other challenges waited. Humans would face them, as they always had, together, clever and unyielding. The name War God had become more than a rumor. It was a symbol, a promise, and a warning. Humanity had proven that when they fought, they did so not just with strength, but with intelligence, courage, and the unwavering determination to endure and thrive. The city awoke to a quiet morning, the air crisp and filled with the faint hum of activity. Humans and moderate Zaire worked together, repairing structures, clearing rubble, and restoring essential services. He stood at the edge of the command tent, watching the coordinated effort unfold. The rogue factions had been contained, their leaders captured, but the threat of future conflict still lingered like a shadow at the edge of every settlement. Peace was fragile, but humanity had proven it could protect it. Reports arrived from scouting teams beyond the city. The rogue Zaire were regrouping, but their forces were fractured, disorganized, and wary of human ingenuity. It was clear that any attempt at renewed aggression would face immediate, coordinated resistance. Ethan studied the maps carefully, noting the positions, supply routes, and potential vulnerabilities. He knew that intelligence and timing were now humanity's greatest weapons. A holographic display lit up the tent, showing a series of rogue faction movements across several sectors. Ethan traced the paths with his finger. "They think they can escape," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But humans do not wait, we act, and when we act, we win." Squads were mobilized for precise strikes, designed to neutralize remaining rogue elements, without causing unnecessary destruction. Engineers deployed portable shields and energy disruptors to protect civilian areas, while tactical units moved swiftly to intercept enemy forces. Every human, from soldier to civilian volunteer, understood the role they played in this operation. The fight was not only about survival, it was about strategy, ingenuity, and moral strength. Ethan led one of the forward squads personally. They advanced through a canyon network where Rogue Zaire had established a temporary base. The terrain was treacherous, full of narrow passes and sharp cliffs, but humans were nimble and resourceful. Using portable grav lifts, they scaled the walls, creating positions the enemy could not anticipate. Engineers disabled security systems and communication arrays, leaving the rogue faction blind and uncoordinated. The first encounter came swiftly. Rogue Zaire patrols had been sent to investigate disturbances in their perimeter. Ethan signaled his squad to engage carefully, disabling enemy units with precise non-lethal methods wherever possible. Confusion spread among the rogue forces as humans appeared in unexpected positions, striking quickly and then vanishing. Every move was calculated, every action deliberate, designed to minimize harm to innocents while maximizing strategic impact. In the center of the canyon, the rogue leader awaited, expecting a standard human assault. Instead, Ethan had anticipated their assumptions and set a trap. Holographic decoys, hidden teams, and redirected energy signals created the illusion of overwhelming force. The rogue leader hesitated, unsure of the enemy's true strength. That hesitation was all Ethan needed. The humans moved in coordinated steps. Tactical units disabled weapon systems, engineers secured critical technology, and reconnaissance squads monitored all exits. The rogue Zaire were forced into surrender, realizing too late that brute force alone could not defeat humans. Intelligence, adaptability, and teamwork had prevailed. Ethan approached the rogue leader personally. The Zaire commander stood tall, prideful, but defeated. "You have underestimated humans," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. We survive because we think, adapt, and act together. That is why we endure. The rogue leader paused, studying Ethan carefully. Your people, they are different from any I have faced, he admitted. Even our best strategists would struggle against such precision and creativity. Ethan nodded. We fight not for glory, but to protect what we value. That is what makes humans strong. That is what makes us worth respect. With the rogue leader captured, remaining forces surrendered without further conflict. The Canyon Network, once a potential staging ground for renewed war, was secured. Human engineers immediately repaired damage, secured energy grids, and restored communication systems. Civilians were guided safely to secure zones, ensuring that no harm came to innocents during the operation. As news of the victory spread, humans and moderate Zaire began to collaborate more closely. Settlements rebuilt faster than anticipated, and trust between species grew stronger. Ethan oversaw the efforts, coordinating teams, ensuring resources were allocated efficiently, and maintaining security. His leadership inspired loyalty, courage, and creativity in all who served alongside him. He joined Ethan at the command tent one afternoon. You have done more than survive, he said. You have led, inspired, and protected your people while earning respect from your former enemies. Humans are extraordinary. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. We do what we must, he replied. We protect, we adapt, and we never give up. That is who we are. The city celebrated quietly, not with loud festivals, but with steady work, shared meals, and the rebuilding of homes. Humans had shown that victory did not require destruction. It required strategy, courage, and ingenuity. And through these efforts, the galaxy began to see humans not just as survivors, but as leaders capable of shaping the future. In the weeks that followed, humans established secure trade routes, fortified settlements, and coordinated with moderate Zaire leaders to prevent any rogue factions from rising again. Intelligence networks were strengthened, and rapid response units were stationed strategically across critical locations. Humans had transformed defense into a system of protection, preparation, and strategic advantage. Ethan spent long hours planning, training, and observing. Each decision was informed by careful thought and experience. He worked closely with Kale and other Zaire leaders, fostering understanding, communication, and cooperation. The successes of humanity were not measured only in battle victories, but in the alliances and trust they built. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of orange and red, Ethan walked among the rebuilt streets. Children played safely, humans and Zaire shared meals, and the hum of daily life echoed through the city. Civilians greeted him with smiles, soldiers with nods of respect, and even moderate Zaire paused to acknowledge the human leader who had turned near defeat into triumph. Ethan paused to watch the horizon. Beyond the city, distant settlements glimmered with light, showing the spread of security and prosperity. The rogue factions were no longer a threat, but the galaxy remained full of unknowns. Yet humans had proven something undeniable. When faced with impossible odds, they could think faster, act smarter, and survive through courage, ingenuity, and unity. Kale joined him quietly. They will remember this day, he said softly. Your people are not only survivors, they are leaders, innovators, and warriors in ways that few can understand. Even we, who have fought for centuries, recognize your strength. Ethan looked at the stars, the calm of night reflecting in his eyes. It is not enough to survive, he said. We must protect, we must lead, and we must earn respect, not through fear, but through courage, intelligence, and heart. That is what humans do best. That is why we endure. Over the following months, humanity's reputation spread across the galaxy. Moderate Zaire settlements openly sought cooperation with humans. Trade, research, and shared defense initiatives flourished. The rogue factions were disbanded, leaders held accountable, and peace, for the first time in decades, had a foundation that felt real. Ethan continued to lead with a steady hand, balancing security, diplomacy, and strategy. Every human involved in the operations had contributed to this outcome. Soldiers, engineers, medics, civilians, all had played a role in turning potential disaster into triumph. And in doing so, humans proved a simple but powerful truth. Strength alone was not enough. It was intelligence, adaptability, moral courage, and unity that made them unstoppable. Years later, the name War God would be spoken quietly in human and Zaire circles alike. It was not a title of fear, but one of respect. Ethan had become a symbol of what humans could achieve. Leadership born of intelligence, courage, and heart. Stories of his victories and humanity's ingenuity spread across the stars, inspiring others to believe in the human spirit. Ethan stood on the balcony of the rebuilt command center, looking out at the stars once more. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, full of potential, full of challenges, but also full of promise. Humanity had survived war, overcome impossible odds, and earned the respect of allies and former enemies alike. The rogue factions were gone, the settlements were safe, and the peace treaty had finally become more than words. Humans had proven that when they fought not only with strength, but with intelligence, creativity, and unwavering courage. They had shown the galaxy that to challenge humanity was to face a force that could think, adapt, and endure like no other. Ethan's gaze lingered on the horizon, a quiet determination in his eyes. This is only the beginning, he thought. The galaxy is vast, full of unknowns, but humans will face whatever comes with courage, strategy, and heart. We survive, we endure, and we thrive. That is who we are. That is the human way. And as the night sky stretched endlessly above, the people below, humans and Zyra alike, worked, lived, and dreamed, secure in the knowledge that they were protected by intelligence, courage, and the unyielding human spirit. The legend of the human war god had begun, and with it, humanity's place in the galaxy was forever cemented.